Hey everyone, my name's Ernesto, and today I want to show you how I create characters for my game, how I import them into Unity, and then how I implement them to work with all of the different systems I've got going on. If I look a little bit tired today, it is because I didn't sleep, so please excuse me for that. First of all, we're going to start off in Blender to model the character. It's where I do all my modeling basically. And for this video, I decided to create a completely new character from scratch so that I can show you exactly what I've got going on. And I've decided to make a small sparrow for this video. I had to Google what the name of the bird is in English. I hope that is the correct one. It's a red sparrow, I think. But don't name me on that. And I start by modeling the basic shape of the character. It usually takes me a while to get the shape to a place where I'm happy with it, simply because I don't usually model that many animals or characters in general. I find characters to be quite challenging to get a good silhouette, which is like the most important part of making a character, so that it's really easily recognizable from afar. I sometimes still don't get that perfect. It's something I think you have to do a lot to really be happy with. So I take a while, like an hour or two, to really get the shape to a place where I'm happy with it. I think this one took me about an hour in general, or in total. But in general, it takes me a little bit longer, depending on how complex the animal or the shape is that I'm trying to accomplish. And this process really is for me just like the definition of trust the process, because in the beginning it looks almost always very awful, and it's really funny. I think in the recording I did here, you can hear me just like giggling the entire time because it looks so shitty. But you have to just kind of endure that. So if you're making a character and in the first 15 to 30 minutes it doesn't look like the thing you're trying to make it, that's fine. You know, it always takes a while to get that shape to a good position. You just have to keep going, keep adding to it, look at a lot of reference, and in the end you'll hopefully get something pretty cool. And I think that actually worked out quite well in this case. Then usually I start by rigging the character next, but in this case I actually forgot it and went on straight to texturing the thing. And for that I use Substance Painter. I have a very old version from like 2018 that I bought in a sale back then, because I don't want to give Adobe any more money than they're already getting. But you can use also Blender's painting function or Photoshop directly if you want like anything that is, a painting solution. I've just noticed as well that Substance Painter 2, the version I'm using, is not on Steam anymore. You can't buy it anymore. All right. Well, then you might have to use a new version. These come with like a lot more features anyway, so that might not be an issue. And painting these is pretty much the same process as modeling. It's a lot of trust the process. It's, in my case, adding basic color shapes first, and then adding a little bit of definition with those, and just adding on colors and like blending a lot to get this like kind of watercolor aesthetic of still like quite defined shapes, so that I'm not going all in and painting this super realistic. I still want to keep it stylized, but I do want some depth within those color shapes. So I don't just want to keep it very simple. I want to give it a little bit of definition through the texture. Also because I'm using a quite low resolution model, or I'm quite low resolution in general, so that it just, to avoid any kind of performance issues, I like to go very low poly. That is an issue mostly when it comes to animating, because you're working with a limited amount of vertices, and so you can get quite tricky to get animations to not look chunky. And you can also tell by the texture that the underlying model isn't that high definition, or isn't using that many vertices. But we can use the texture to add a little bit more depth to that model without increasing the size of, or the amount of vertices. And when I'm done with that, in this case, I go back into Blender a few hours later because I realized I forgot to rig the thing. And I'm adding a simple rig starting with a single bone and then just building on top of that, keeping in mind what I want this character to do in the end, or what, you know, it could do, even if I don't have that functionality yet. But it's always easier to make a, well, good quality rig for any eventuality instead of just doing the basic or the minimum, because you don't need anything else right now. But if you ever decide to move on from that and maybe give the character a little bit more depth or make it, you know, animated a little bit more than you know, plan on doing right now, it's much harder to go back in and change that rig instead of just making a rig that is already capable of doing a little bit more right away. And what I've noticed, if you're ever planning on, like, I'm doing a lot of like head turning in the end, so the characters of the heads of the characters in my game should follow the player when the player is walking past. The character isn't just statically looking forward all the time, but you have a little bit of personality in them, and they actually look at you when you're talking to them. And for that to work correctly, it's good to have the head bone totally straight instead of, you know, tilted in some way, because if it's tilted, then the local axes are just off by some degree, you know, however much you tilted it. And that can really lead to some very weird issues. So having that completely straight helped me in this case to have that work more consistently. And once I'm finished with the rig, I go on to creating a simple idle animation in this case, because I don't need the character to do anything else right now. And going back in and adding an animation is actually quite simple. So I create an animation that's quite long. I do some simple head movements, some spine movements, so that the character feels natural, and then we're done. And once I'm happy with that, we head off into Unity. Okay, so now we're in Unity, and I just realized I am an idiot. It is not a sparrow we're making, it is a robin. For some reason, I confuse them all the time. They're for some reason the same in my brain, which is quite stupid. So I have this robin model, and I'm assigning our robin material to that yet. And for the eyes, I just have like a standard eyes thing that might not work. We will see. Oh, that's the wrong one. I'm just searching for eyes. I have a lot of materials in my project. Like this. You can see that looks a little bit weird because we're still using the beaver texture, which is obviously wrong. So go into the texture, search for robin. Assign that. That looks better. And now I can go back to the model, and you can tell that that actually looks pretty good. Okay, go back into the animation tab. We have to make sure that the idle animation loops. Some bones are apparently, some vertices are not assigned to bones. That is my bad. Yeah, you can tell that the nest is maybe a little bit too big for the robin. That can happen sometimes, because I made that like way before. You know, it might be fine if I just scale it up slightly. I do think I will have to like scale this down though. It's called cylinder. Why? I haven't even named that. That's so bad. And that's still like much too big. Oh, I think I just need to decrease the size of the eggs. But I can't do that right now, so let's just keep it like this. This bird just has like massive eggs. And you can see there's a hole in the geometry there as well. Don't look at that. Okay, so let's just place it on here. So that's what's the model, that is what the model looks like in game. So this gives us a good opportunity to kind of look at the texture and get an idea of if, you know, we like what we see. I think I'm fine with this front part. I'm not totally convinced yet. I might go back and, you know, change that still. but that's always something we can do. Editing the material or the texture is quite easy, luckily. So create a new folder within my environment, call that NPC. NPCs, drop the robin in there, just to make sure that it's nice, neatly organized. And we're pretty much finished what implementing, like for the implementing part, because, you know, it doesn't need much more. So the character is already in the game. We could walk by this part and, you know, look at it already, but it's not really doing much. So what kind of systems do I have that my NPCs would interact with? Well, for example, what I've said before, that the character's heads should turn towards the player. We can do that pretty much right away. The issue with this is I kind of need to look it up every time I do it. Well, maybe I can do it just like this. So you need to install the animation rigging package from Unity. Well, I'm an idiot. You obviously need to select the model first, and that creates a rig builder with an animator for you. That rig is for some reason always at a very weird position with a very weird scale, so reset that, create a new empty underneath that, call that like head constraint or something like that, add a multi-aim constraint to that. Create a child, call that target, give it a little gizmo so we can recognize it always, move it like in front of the head where this character should naturally be looking. So, you know, somewhere in front of it. This should be fine, it can always be adjusted later. Use that as the source object, maybe, you know, decrease the influence a little bit. And we basically only want to lock the y-axis, I'm pretty sure. We could also lock all of them. Let's just keep all of them right now. And then, because this isn't an owl, let's do some limits so that the head can't spin around, because that would look a little silly. And then go into the armature and search for the head. There it is. And that is going to be our constraint object. So if I turn this, you can see that was what we want. And that is also kind of rotating all of the axes. So, you know, you can already see that this, we might need to decrease the limit still, because, well, this starts to look very strange really quickly. So I might need to adjust that and, you know, reduce that still a little bit. Alright, so, but this is pretty much all we need to do here. This should work now, hopefully, maybe, we will find out later. So add a, what did I name it? Did I look at target or something? No. What did I call it? Yeah, well, that's the issue when you have like 1,000 scripts in your game. I don't remember. Let's have a look at a different NPC. That's always my way of figuring out what I did, is just looking at a different NPC. It's called move head to tag. Okay, so let's add that real quick. Move head to tag. That tag is going to be player. I also could have just copied the version from the other object, but hey, from the other NPC. Okay, so this is pretty much all we need to do. This should now automatically move the head to the target. We can test that by just clicking play. It's going to give us a bunch of errors, but that's fine. And then I can just move this target around, and you can see how the head is deforming. You can also see that the standard might be a little bit too high. Which, yeah, no, we can adjust though. That is fine. Yeah, that's pretty much how it works. And now we just would need to walk past and he would follow us with his head. Great. Let me just get rid of these errors. Okay, so that is everything we need to do here. Now I have a bunch of systems that are supposed to keep track of where an NPC is right now in relation to its status within the game. So, for example, I have a bunch of characters that change their position based on your progress through the game. So, for example, you talk with a certain character or give them a certain item, and then they change their position. So, you meet, for example, let me just quickly hop into the forest, and here you meet the hedgehog. And you need to find him his smithing tools, and once you do, he will go back into the village and start smithing for you. So that is how that works. And you can also sometimes see in this scene, for example, this character is here twice. That is because in the beginning, the game really doesn't know what your status is. So once the game is loaded, it figures out what it's supposed to do, what character is supposed to be active or not. And that works because I have a character state that is called. And that character state has multiple states with an index and associated objects that should be activated when that state is true. So for example, we have this hedgehog, and when that hedgehog is not here, this door is supposed to be closed. But once you talk to the hedgehog, its state goes from 0 to 1, and the hedgehog is supposed to be active, its dialogue is supposed to be active, and you can actually go into his house. And we can do the same thing with the sparrow, for example, but we don't have anywhere for it to go yet. But this would be how I adjust where that character is supposed to be. We have different ways of increasing that index. One would be through a dialogue. You give the character a certain item, a dialogue pops up, hey, you brought me whatever, thank you so much. And at the end of the dialogue, we increase that character's state. But I have a different version as well that is called a quest advancement in my case, and that has necessary characters and their necessary states. So for example, once you've talked to the hedgehog, gave him his tools, his state will be set to 1. And once you enter this scene again, this quest advancement script will check if the hedgehog state is 1, and if that is true, then the fox or the fox's state will be set to 1. And the fox will disappear. So once you've talked to the hedgehog, the fox will disappear because you've did so even though you haven't actually done anything with the fox himself. So that's kind of the indirect way of influencing characters. And then he will go into the forest. And my issue with this system right now is I don't have the perfect way of dealing with that yet, so I'm open to suggestions. The world only changes once you reload the scene. Otherwise, I would need a bunch of animations. These characters don't actually move. They stay where they are and they change their position once you reload the scene, like Dark Souls, for example. So in this case, you have the beaver right here. He is really annoyed that he can't get this tree to fall. You can also see the 2 states of this tree at once here. And you need to find him an axe, and then he gets the tree down and disappears. But only once you've, saved once and reloaded the scene. It's a little bit clunky. I'm not really sure how to convey to the player that you have to save or you have to reload the scene in order for something to happen. It kind of works. It's kind of a little bit awkward. I'm not entirely sure on how to deal with that yet. But that's pretty much where I am with this. And that is how I make my characters. We have dialogues. The dialogues in my case are actually separate from the models of the characters. So in this scene you can see we have a bunch of dialogues that are all bunched together here. And the dialogue for the beaver is a separate object that has a dialogue interaction on it that works similarly to the dialogue tutorial I made a week ago or 2 weeks ago. Only it's a little bit more fleshed out with different dialogues and certain dialogues if you bring the character a certain item or you have that in your inventory. Alright, that is pretty much it. This is how I make my characters. If you have any questions or any ideas on how to improve my systems or my workflow or whatever, please leave them in the comments. I'm always very happy to read them. And I still need to think of a quest line or a storyline for this bird. So if you have any idea of what this bird might do within the story, or what you could give the bird and what you could receive from it or something, please let me know. I'm always struggling with the story, so I'm always happy to have some insight on what you guys think. Alright, that's it from me. Have a wonderful day and I will see you next time. Until then, bye bye.